All guests on ZASLOW Show 2.0 brought to us by the official beer of the program, Johnny Cuba, European roots with that Caribbean soul, a refreshing German lager in a can. How are you going to enjoy the Stanley Cup Finals this weekend without a Johnny Cuba in your hand? You know what I'm talking about. Go to your local Sedano's, Presidente, Winn-Dixie, Fresco y Mas. You pick up a Johnny Cuba. That's how you get the weekend going. Make sure you always drink responsibly. And don't forget Johnny Cuba's mantra, stay tranquilo. Joining us now, she knows she is one of my favorites, Trysta Krick, BetMGM, Odyssey's BetMGM, every weeknight, 7 to 11 p.m. Eastern time. One of my favorites to have on the program. Hello, Trysta. How are you today?
What's up? The weather's good. We've got the most the peak of our sportsdom with the Stanley Cup Finals and the NBA Finals happening all at once. You are still alive, my friend. Good for you. Another good year for folks in Florida.
Are you dialed in? Like, obviously, and I want to talk finals, I want to talk about last night with you, but are you guys dialed into the Stanley Cup? Have you been all over it on your show?
We've talked about it throughout the course of the playoffs. I think that the time it got really intense was obviously in that Rangers series because we have a lot of Rangers commentators and people who cover the team that come on the show, Johnny Lazarus being one. He's very sad. And it felt like there was a little extra, just a little ribbing for him in terms of like the Rangers were done. Yeah, Florida looks excellent. Florida looks physical. They look fast. They look able to get into their offensive sets faster than everybody else. Obviously, the penalty kill has been incredible this year as well. I think 10-0. So yeah, it's been fun. It's been really exciting. I think honestly, if I wasn't so dialed into the NBA, I would be a very rabid hockey fan. I can get into it and like emotionally very excited from hockey in a way that NBA does just not do for me.
Tickets are so expensive. Like, there's no way I'm going to be able to go to a Stanley Cup Finals game. The cheapest ticket to get into the building is about $600. In Edmonton, it's about $1,000. Here, it's $600. But it's not just me. It would be me times 3 because I got to take my boys, And that's like, it's a crazy amount of money to sit all the way up top. What's the most money you've ever spent to go to a sporting event?
I went to the national title game. And so this is a funny story. So I want to say it was like $850, but it ended up being like, I ended up going to see Oregon play Auburn. And so the $850 was like 50-yard line.
And it's because you're into Oregon. You're from Oregon. That's why.
Went to Oregon. Yes. And it was the first time we had ever really been at that level. It was the last year of the BCS. And so it was Cam Newton's year, and it was Darren Thomas in Phoenix, actually. So I was staying with my grandma. I drove over, and then I ended up like just getting the ticket scalped and was just walking around. Hey, do you have an extra ticket? Do you have an extra ticket? Do you have an extra ticket? And so that was actually face value that the guy gave it to me for.
And so if it's $850 back then, you got $850 cash on you. Then is what you're telling me.
Yeah, I had to go to the ATM, and it was painful. It was really, really painful.
Well, and then they lose that game, okay? And so, see, that's the thing for me. Number one, spending that much money, and number two, then what if your team loses? Because and then people tell me, oh, but it's the experience. Like, I don't know, spending a ton of money and then my team loses, that's not a fun experience to me.
No, it's not, and there's nowhere you'd rather be than anywhere but there, like anywhere but there. And when you're talking and walking through the crowd of fans that are celebrating around you,
sucks.
Very different than like turn the TV off, go to bed.
Yeah. I got to be in a controlled environment. That's why, like, these Stanley Cup Finals, ZASLOW, you love the Panthers. Don't you want to be there? It's like, yeah, I want to be there, but I don't know what schmucks are going to be sitting around me the whole game. I'd rather be with my boys, with people that I love and enjoying it,
Didn't you go to a game last year?
I went to a Stanley Cup Final game last year. Yeah, I went to Game 4 last year. Me and my son, one of my sponsors, brought us. So, okay,
wow.
one of my sponsors is going to bring me and my son And I've never been to a Stanley Cup game at that point. Let's go. But, I went. I've done it before. If someone wants to give me tickets, I'll go. But spending the money, I want to sit in a controlled environment. And I want to be on the verge of projectile vomit in my family room, just enjoying all of the anxiety there.
Yeah, I get that, dude. I won't go to a game. I won't go to a Ducks game unless there's very low stakes. I'm going to probably go to some home games this year now that Oregon's in the Big Ten. So it'll be fascinating. Yeah, I feel you, dude. Like, the traveling is really bad. It happened to me also when we played LSU that was not even like a big game. That was the first game of the season, the next season in Dallas. And it was like a bajillion degrees. And I threw up. I had like been drinking the night before, threw up. LSU fans were dragging dead ducks through the streets. Tiger bait, y'all, ducks, just tiger bait. So yeah, I've had my fill.
Yeah, it's not fun to me. Anyway, going into the finals, what was your pick going into last night? And I would imagine, like, whoever it is, your pick's not going to change after one game, although we all like to overreact. Who was your pick going into the game last night?
I had Mavs in 7, and I also had Mavs plus 6.5 in the game, which was never, ever going to happen.
Yeah.
Like, you could just tell right away. I just think in general you saw, like, I was looking at the keys and kind of just what happened last night, and like going through the box score, and there's just nobody was making any shots for Dallas other than Luka. That's pretty much plain and simple. Other than PJ Washington, you had no role players doing a thing. You had no assists, and you had a block party for Boston. They were just so active. I think they had 9 blocks, and Dallas had 9 assists.
Yeah.
So they had the same amount of blocks as assists. That's crazy. I think Boston just looks really good right now. They look obviously like they have 5 really, really good all NBA caliber players playing and dialed in. Jason Tatum didn't even need to score last night. So Dallas is going to need to come out and have Kyrie Irving's going to need to be really big in order for them to figure out a way to compete.
I was a little bit surprised at, I guess, the lack thereof, the vitriol directed at Kyrie Irving. I thought it was going to be crazy. I didn't think it was that big of a thing.
And he didn't play that well. So I feel like that might have had something to do with the lack of vitriol. If he's putting up 40, he's getting the Trae Young treatment at the Garden. Like, he's getting the Draymond Green. He didn't do anything that would cause alarm in the building either. Like, remember Draymond stepped on Grant Williams, and there was that whole thing in a couple of years ago. And then that turned into a huge thing with the fan base. So, yeah, there is no love for Kyrie, but you're right. There was no talk about heckling. There was no talk about the common Boston racial slurs that have been shouted to opposing teams and players. So, yeah, I was surprised about that as well. It was actually quite genteel.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, we thought it was going to be a whole big production because it's the finals, and so there's so much on the line. But maybe that's exactly why it wasn't a whole big thing, is because, it's the finals. We're a little bit more focused on actually winning the finals as opposed to the regular season where, all right, let's just boo the hell out of Kyrie Irving. I think it's actually the opposite of what we thought it was going to be as far as the venom and the hate.
Yeah, and I think it's been long enough where, I don't know, maybe the fans have not gotten over it, but the level of pain and anger has started to subside. They're in the finals. They've moved on without Kyrie Irving. Kyrie Irving's not in like this huge market. He wasn't spurned. He ended up like having to humble himself to go to a place like Dallas. So I don't know. It's going to be an interesting storyline to see if it ever pops up during this series.
I think Dallas is going to win the series too. I felt 6 games, 6-7, whatever. But we love overreacting after one game. Like, you don't feel differently about the series after last night. I could totally see Dallas winning Sunday night.
Yeah, absolutely. I think in general too, you've had Dallas lose by a bajillion to the Clippers. That happened as well. So, and they ended up winning that series. You've had games where Dallas has had to come back from down 30, and they find a way to do that. Dallas is a very resilient team, but what we need is essentially guys like Derek Lively and Daniel Gafford and probably Maxi Kleba to step up and not just play really good perimeter defense on Kristaps Porzingis, but also they need to score. Like, that's the key, is obviously putting the ball in the hoop for Dallas, considering that they have so much three-point shooting in Boston. And I would say this, there's going to be multiple games where Boston's not hot from three. They were pretty good. And when they don't shoot the three well, or even like mediocre, when they shoot the ball poorly, they have no other offense. They have no other option. And they almost like self-destruct, they start making mistakes. They start forcing shots and things get really ugly really fast. So that's kind of how I see this going, is like ebbs and flows between both teams of that type of a thing.
Trysta, do you think Dan Hurley is going to take this Laker job? I do not.
I hope not. I'm so despondent about it.
Why?
Because
very dramatic.
As a bettor, there's nothing better feeling than betting on UConn and Dan Hurley. Like, nothing.
Okay.
12-0 against the spread in the playoffs, in the final, in March Madness 2 years in a row, and not even close. I made more money betting on UConn the last 2 years than probably on anything else. And that's not like, this year I took like $100 and then I rolled it over every round.
Wow.
Rolled it over every round. So me and PJ, one of my co-hosts, went to the Final Four to watch Alabama, his team, play UConn. And I had an incredible amount of money on UConn, and that thing went down to the wire in terms of covering the numbers. So Dan Hurley is the gift that keeps on giving. And then I hate the Lakers as a Portland fan, and I love Dan Hurley and everything that he's about as a culture guy, as a guy who's like intuitive and looking at kids and looking how they watch on their phone and looking how they communicate with their parents, and are they shouldering blame? Are they passing blame off? Like he said, like one guy can kill a locker room and kill your entire program, sink you like a cancer. And then to have him go to a place like Los Angeles and that Lakers organization, which, let's be honest, it's a mess. Jeannie Buss is not a great owner. She has people in her ear. There's like a million cooks in the kitchen. I actually texted, I've never done this one time, but I texted Jeff Goodman and I said, Dan Hurley needs to know that Dan Hurley needs to know there's a million cooks in this kitchen. This is one of the most dysfunctional franchises. You're going to see the lights and the glitz and the glam of the purple and gold and all those banners. It's not what it seems, okay? Like the 15 million is nice, but this is not going to work. I didn't even ask for Jeff Goodman's opinion. I just texted him that on my own. Hey, Dan needs to know this.
I don't think he's going to take the job. I think he's smart enough to realize, Gino Auriemma just got the extension at the same school. I think it's a little bit of a ploy to get more money. All right. You'd be coaching LeBron for maybe 2 years. You're going to leave this cush gig at UConn to rebuild the Lakers. It's not a good job for Dan Hurley can have any job he wants. College, of course, which he would never leave UConn for, or the pros. He can have any job he wants. That's not a good job for him. It's a good job for Darvin Ham. I mean, it's 1 out of 30 in the entire world. If you've never been a coach before, of course, coaching the Lakers is a great job. If you could have any job you want, the Lakers job's not a good job, Trysta.
No, it's not a good job. And you look at the players on this roster, Rui Hachimura is a gentle, fragile soul. You can't scream at Rui Hachimura. You can't scream at Anthony Davis. Anthony Davis isn't like a tough kid. They call him bones of, what is it? Paper, skin of paper, bones of glass. You can't grab him by the scruff of his neck. What are we talking about? I don't understand how this is going to work. Yelling coaches in college have never translated to the NBA. Not one time. This has never happened. They always bounce back.
How about LeBron wants you to believe that he has no say in the coach, for the first time in his career, he's had a say in every coach. He's had a say in the hiring and the firing. And now the team that is likely going to draft his son, he has no say in who's going to coach his son. That's believable.
And he has no say that they're going to draft his son. Like, oh, LeBron, if you weren't here, we would still be interested in Bronny James. We would still move up into the second round for your son, independently that this is an important aspect for you. No chance. No chance. And I'm really curious about what happens with the Mind the Game podcast. I'm locked in on that.
Well, I do believe JJ Redick's going to be the coach.
You do?
Yeah.
So do they keep that podcast going then?
No way. Come on. No.
Come on. We need it, right? Like, we need a debrief of 82 games between coach and star player on a podcast.
I just don't believe the Lakers are a serious team. Like, you're going, and I understand that, they're trying to hire Dan Hurley, but I don't think he's going to take it. And then the option is, who should we get as coach? Oh, I know, someone who's never coached before, JJ Redick. That's not a serious team to me, Trysta.
And I don't think, the thing that I find to be very unserious is that the rhetoric and the language around both Dan Hurley and JJ Redick is that they think they're the next Pat Riley.
Oh, come on. Mind you that Pat Riley was an assistant coach for several years. Don't forget about that. Yes, he came from broadcasting, but he was also an assistant coach for several years before he became the head coach of the Lakers.
Yeah, I don't see why you would believe that JJ Redick is the next Pat Riley. I don't think there's anything that gives you, other than the broadcasting chops, I don't think there's anything, and a good basketball mind. But JJ Redick wasn't the level of player that Pat Riley was. Doesn't have the demeanor that Pat Riley has.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it was a different time. Riley was tough. He was a tough guy.
Yeah.
Trysta, give me some thoughts here on all the commotion in the WNBA this last week. I'm not going to sit here and tell you I'm some kind of expert with WNBA. This is the first time in my life. A lot of it has to do with Caitlin Clark, and more of it has to do with the fact that I'm hosting shows on ESPN Radio. So I have to know a little bit about what's going on. I'm not necessarily watching it because I love it. But the commotion the last week, Caitlin Clark, Kennedy Carter, picking up. Give me some thoughts on what you've heard lately.
Yeah, I think it's so complex. And the more you know about the history of the game, the more complex it gets. And to me, it feels like there's a group of people who are riding and watching the WNBA because of Caitlin Clark. And they watched her in college, and they tuned in at some point a couple of years ago, probably prior to the LSU game, not during the LSU game. I don't think that's when she became a part of the collective consciousness. I think it was much earlier than that, because she was breaking records and doing all kinds of crazy stuff. And people were comparing her to Steph Curry, even the year before that. Mm-hmm. So there's a group of fans, I think, that are super excited about Caitlin and really don't maybe know a lot about the WNBA. And they know that she's transcendent and exciting. And they maybe thought that she was going to come in and like I saw this, she had the fourth best odds for MVP, mm-hmm. which is crazy. A rookie is not coming in and winning MVP. And then you've got so these expectations of Caitlin are really high from a group of fans that were never really WNBA fans. And so they're really loud. And some of them are racist, probably, some. And some have said really nasty things about Angel Reese and South Carolina and LSU as a whole. A lot of racially charged language there. So You've got that group. Then you got the WNBA players and coaches that feel, as Gino Auriemma has said to Dan Patrick, pretty disrespected by those new fans. And so they're wanting to show Caitlin Clark and mostly her fans, she's not the one. She's not the great white hope. She's not everything that you think that she is. There's going to be a learning adjustment process. And not only is there going to be one, we're going to make sure there's one. So we're going to pick her up 94 feet from the rim, even when she's down 30. We're going to double team her. We're going to face guard her. We're going to make her life absolutely hell. Then you add in this like contingent of media members that I think are feeling maybe a little squeezed out, or they're feeling like those newer fans don't have the right to come in and say anything about the WNBA because they don't know anything, which I think is very unfair. And you have to have new fans grow the sport to make it commercial and to give these players more money and to make the sport larger and more accessible. And commercialization and mainstream is that's just the way it is. Like, there's going to be uneducated fans. So they're like holding their ground and gatekeeping the conversation, and also making almost like gaslighting us into thinking that Caitlin Clark's not being treated any different than any other rookie, and telling new fans what you're seeing and you think is like abnormal. No, that's just the W. And that's wrong too. Like, I think everybody's like a little right and a little wrong. And things
that part's weird to me, where it's like, stop telling me what my eyes are saying, the opposite of what you're trying to tell me. I've watched sports for a little bit. All right. I know what I'm watching. I know what I'm seeing. That part's been weird.
That to me is like very disrespectful to people like you, right? Like, you may not know the history of the W, and you may not have watched a lot of WNBA games, but you've watched a lot of sports, and you can feel the energy, not just the how hard the fouls are, but the energy in which the fouls are being delivered, or the way that just the energy person to person, right? Like, you can tell a minority, but some of these players in the moment, or maybe not in the moment, dislike Caitlin Clark and the whole thing around her. Like, Kennedy Clark obviously was very chippy back and forth with Caitlin, but also right before she hip checked her, she called her a bitch. And she said the word bitch, not in the way of like, listen here, bitch, like, bitch, like, I'm about to lay you out kind of bitch. So that's there. But those WNBA media contingency, and they're all like, it's the same thing. No matter, I can tell you what they're about to tweet before they even tweet it. Like, Caitlin Clark's not that special. She's struggling. The way that she's being treated is exactly the same. She came in, and the only reason she's popular is because the whole rookie class is popular, downgrading her transcendency and her popularity, and also saying, you guys just want us to worship her. You guys just want us to kiss her ass and bow down to her every time. And you want those players to do the same. No, nobody's saying that. Really. Nobody. And then you have NBA media talking about it, and they're men, and they don't know a ton about the game, and that's causing backlash too. Like Charles Barkley, Stephen A. You've had it. The list goes on, and LeBron even chiming in. And then that WNBA media comes in and says, see, like, they are protecting the great white hope. These black men in the media are doing exactly what like the Caitlin Clark fans want, which is to shield her and shepherd her and protect her. And so it's very racially charged. It's very ultra left and ultra right. And I don't like any of it. Like, I really don't. Meanwhile, A'ja Wilson, the two-time MVP, put up 36 points last night. I think she had 13 rebounds and 6 steals. She got clocked in the face and was bleeding. So the WNBA is getting bigger, and I think there's a lot of people who would rather it stay small than have fans that they don't like watching it.
Excellent job, Trysta. I mean, you hit it from all angles there.
Thank you.
The thing that I think is also happening is I think some people are having a hard time on how to cover it being a physical women's game. And what I mean by that is, I kind of think it's similar to, really like right around when Ronda Rousey started to get big with the UFC, and now women's fighting is going to be a big thing. And it was like, ooh, I don't know if I like that. Women are punching each other, and women are being really physical, and I don't want to see women get hurt. There's a lot of that. And I think there's a little bit of that carrying over to what we're seeing in the WNBA. It's like, wow, some of these women, they're nasty and they're physical. And it's like, well, no, they're kind of exactly the way that men are. And we're just confused seeing it because it's women. And we don't like it. We as men maybe don't like watching women get hurt. I don't want to watch A'ja Wilson bloody from the nose and she's got a black eye. It's like, women need to be protected, Like, we need to be really nice and delicate with women. And I think there's a lot of that where we're not used to seeing women compete at this level when it's really like, yeah, they're competing the exact same way that men do, and we're not used to it.
Yeah, and we're not used to like how to talk about it,
Right.
and you're not sure what's a cheap shot and what's just like a super physical play, because everything when you're new to the W, or even like in general watching women's sports, everything feels kind of cheap, right? And it wouldn't feel cheap in the men's game. It would just
Right.
look like an
It
everyday
would just be
Tuesday.
physical.
Correct. And I think you're right. And I think that's probably a part of what has held women's hoops back, is this, like, I don't really want to watch a game that's ultra physical. And while it's gotten much more skilled, so much of the W has been bigs dominating down low, which is the early iterations of basketball as a whole, which we've evolved past. In the men's side, we want to see perimeter scoring. And so, that's, I think, another reason that people love Caitlin Clark, and they're going to love Paige Beckers, and they're going to love Juju Watkins, is you've got very highly skilled perimeter players that are opening up with the game in a spacing way, and are less physical than, say, players like Brittany Griner down low, right? Like, or Asia Wilson, or like Jonquel Jones. So I think there's an element of it that's just the fact that the NBA is only 27 years old.
Great job, Trysta. Always excellent. What are you watching these days? Any new shows, any new movies that you've seen?
I have one for you. It's called The Veil, and it's Elizabeth Moss from
yeah, she's great.
Elizabeth Moss has crazy eyes and like damaged eyes down. Like, that's her jam. When she like looks off into the distance, like she's processing a bajillion types of trauma, and she's trying to like protect herself emotionally to like steal herself out into the world. That's her jam. So that's what she has here. Crazy backstory. She works for the MI6, but had really traumatic upbringing in terms of how she lost her dad, which she gets into. And she's following and trying to figure out whether this woman at a refugee camp in Turkey is leading an ISIS plot.
It's a show or a movie?
It's a show. Okay. And they can't figure out whether she's leading this ISIS plot, 6 episodes, Hulu, to try to, do something to the U.S., or whether this is just a woman who's in the wrong place at the wrong time and wants to protect her daughter, and they're playing.
I like the sound of this. This is something I can watch with my wife.
Kind of like the Americans vibe. I know you like that.
Yes.
Kind of like, what's real? It's not real. Like, a lot of like in the shadows, a lot of like double entendres. Great stuff.
Well, I can tell you, for folks you listening, Trysta has been very good with the recommendations. You recommended Goliath to me, and we loved Goliath. That show was crazy, Billy Bob Thornton. And this show, The Veil, that sounds right up our alley. I like that. All right, that's a good suggestion.
Trysta and Ebert.
That's right, Trysta and Ebert. Let's go. Trysta, plug a bunch of stuff. Tell folks everything you got going on. Go ahead.
Podcast 3 times a week. Heat Check. If you like the NBA, it's a comedy podcast. We'll be doing that more on video. We do that every part of the season, even the off season, 3 times a week, wherever you get your podcast. Also, BetMGM Tonight, Monday through Friday. You can watch that on twitch.com/BetQL, or on YouTube Live, or I think it's like nationally syndicated on 100 channels or something, but you can find that in podcast form as well. I also am now doing Chicago radio. I don't know if I told you this, Zaz.
Oh, okay.
But right. WSCR, The Score, talking Chicago sports on the weekends, Cubs, Bears, Bulls. Probably we don't need to talk about the White Sox right now. They're
probably
really
not.
Bad. Probably bad. So, so doing that on the weekends, just very, very busy. I think there's more, but I'm not sure. And then follow me on Instagram at Trysta_Krick. That's where the takes come in like real time form.
Excellent job, Trysta. We love having you on. Keep up the great work. You're one of our favorites.
Enjoy the cruise, my man. Enjoy it.